Just last week, the U.S. Department of Commerce released the most recent international trade figures, and Utah once again is scoring very impressively on those lists. Joining us today to discuss those numbers, as well as the free trade agreement recently signed by the president, is Lou Kramer. He is the president and CEO of World Trade Center Utah. Lou, thanks for taking a minute.
Marty, it's always great to be here, and particularly such good news to share. For the first 10 months of this year, Utah's exports to the world are up 38% over last year's record. Just as a reminder, last year, 2009, Utah had the best international trade performance in America. In fact, we were the only state in the United States that grew its exports year over year. So we're excited to see this because international exports mean Utah jobs, directly related to that fact. And we like imports, that's what international trade is all about, but exports is the real driver of job growth in this economy.
So as you mentioned, record years, the last two around in the neighborhood of $10.3 billion in merchandise exports, last year being higher than the year before that. These numbers that have just been released are through October, so does that next period closes at the end of the calendar year?
Right. Well, we won't get the calendar year numbers until February of 2011. But may I first of all compliment you on your excellent grasp of those numbers, because in fact we did last year have over $10.3 billion in merchandise exports. And for a state of our size, without an inland seaport, that's very phenomenal. And we congratulate the small and medium-sized businesses and the large exporters in the state making that happen. The numbers for the first 10 months of this year are already about $11.4 billion. So we've already eclipsed last year's record with 2 more months to go in this year. So we're excited. And that really is creating higher paying, higher trained, and higher quality jobs for the state of Utah.
So if you're a betting man, bottom line, if you're a betting man, you're going to finish higher this year than the year before and have a third straight record-setting year.
You know, I'm not a betting man, but I'm a very proud man of what's happening in the state of Utah. And our numbers, if they continue at this pace for the next 2 months, will in fact have doubled in the last 5 years, which is precisely the goal that President Obama set earlier this year in his State of the Union address, saying we want to double exports in the next 5 years. We've said to him, come to Utah. We have doubled exports in the last 5 years, and we have jobs to show for it.
Speaking of the president, that makes a nice segue. He's been out pounding the international pavement, so to speak. As you always say, the most important distance in international business is the final 3 feet, and the president's been out there trying to make that happen. He had some mixed results in India, but the good news was from Korea. Tell me how the free trade agreement with Korea benefits Utah business.
We're excited about that, Marty. The last 3 feet resulted in a handshake between the presidents of the United States and Korea, because after many, many years of debate, discussion, negotiation, back and forth, the president finally signed a free trade agreement with Korea, which is our 8th largest trading partner. It's a huge economy, one of the great success stories of the 20th century. It is almost $1 trillion a year economy, and our exports, their two-way exports back and forth to Korea are almost about $20 billion a year. The challenge has been, now that he's signed it, that the Congress has to approve it. But we think that's going to happen with presidential support. But the beauty of that for the state of Utah is many of the areas that the free trade agreement impacts are precisely those areas where we're very competitive. High-tech products, medical devices, agricultural products, components for aircraft and automobiles. So we are really pleased about the opportunities that will provide for this great state of Utah.
The White House says that agreement will create 70,000 new jobs. They also call it the biggest free trade agreement signed since NAFTA in 1994, obviously U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Is that a little shooting for the moon, or is that a pretty accurate assessment?
I think that's probably even an understatement, given the dynamic growth of that economy, which is growing at 3 or 4 times the pace of the U.S. economy right now. And it will open up, particularly for those U.S. companies that have, for lots of different reasons, it's not just tariffs on our products, but there's the non-tariff barriers, such as regulations and standards and other things that have made it difficult to get American products into that market. We are now in a level playing field, and those tariff reductions, both on the tariff side and the non-tariff side, will make a huge difference to Utah companies.
Tariffs on U.S. automobiles being shipped to South Korea reduced 50% as part of that agreement. Not only the 70,000 jobs, but the White House also says $11 billion in exports coming from that. That's a figure that sounds pretty familiar to us here in Utah.
That's right.
We mentioned things went really well with the Korean Free Trade Agreement. There were some mixed results, depending on who you were listening to, about the India trip. But your thought on that is that those relationships are still strong and that there's still benefit for the U.S., obviously, in having a trade partner with India.
Oh, clearly. It is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and its demographics are even better than the Chinese. They will have younger workers and more educated workers longer than the Chinese will if you follow the demographic trends. Utah has been a solid trade partner. In fact, our growth to that part of the world has gone up 400 or 500% in the last 5 years because of the opportunities for the U.S. and Utah in specific to deal directly with their colleagues in India. The president's trip had only mixed results because he signed a lot of agreements for companies, or witnessed the signing of company agreements, but on the larger scale of a long-term bilateral commercial relationship, the government just has to, our government has to encourage the Indian government to reduce some of the regulatory and tariff barriers as we've done in Korea, and that's not yet quite at the spot where it's taken place. But we look forward to it. We're optimistic, and particularly in this state, we have a marvelous record of dealings with our friends in India.
Lou Kramer is the president and CEO of World Trade Center Utah, and as the man himself likes to say, the international business makes good business sense and
lots of business dollars.
lots of business dollars. Lou, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Marty. We appreciate all that's happening with the Chamber. We're great partners with the Chamber, and our website can be found through the Chamber's website.